Can we all agree that in America right now, there is a major concern about mass shootings? You see, no matter where you go, no matter what pocket of the country you're in, mass shootings happens to be a normal way of life. In fact, it's so normalized and ingrained in our society that whenever we hear about one on the news, we just say, "Oh my gosh, that's messed up," or "Oh my gosh, how sad that is." And then we go about our day and eat our donuts and drink our coffee. Well, let's harp a little bit today on why this is a growing problem in America right now, specifically with mass school shootings. Obviously, I love the kids, I care about the kids, and the fact that these children, these poor babies, are being murdered in cold blood in schools all across the nation, it really hurts my soul. Let's check our reality.
Hello, my name is Kylie Osage, and I'm a wounded survivor of the Oxford High School shooting on November 30th, 2021. 14 months later, I experienced my second school shooting, where I was present on Michigan State University's campus in 2023. Unfortunately, there's now a rising number of students who have experienced multiple school shootings, but I wanted to share a little bit of my experience in hopes to let other survivors know that they're not alone. Over the past 4 years, healing has not been linear by any means. Some days I feel strong and proud of my progress, but there are days where I reflect on my experiences and I feel isolated, confused, and almost like I'm reliving it all over again. Obviously, it's been hard dealing with the constant fear, memory, and pressure just to be okay. But throughout my journey, I've also come to know so much love and support. My friends, family, hospital staff, and therapy have all reminded me that I'm not going through this alone. Sometimes it's just the little things that give me hope, like getting back into a routine, taking a self-care night, or just reflecting back on how far I've come physically and mentally. I've also come to learn about my own voice and how to use it. Gun violence is now the #1 killer of kids and teens in America. We need to understand that this is not normal. And I'm not here to preach, but rather to educate others, speak to politicians, and to have those hard conversations to try and lift up those around me. As we approach the anniversary of the Oxford High School shooting, I'd like to send a message to those who also feel lost sometimes in such a state of fear and uncertainty. I get it. You're not alone, even if sometimes it feels like it. Healing takes time, and there's no correct way to do it. Just know that there are communities out there rooting for you, and I'm rooting for you. And you're stronger than you think. This month, I'd like everyone to remember their names: Hannah, Tate, Madison, and Justin. Remember their kindness, their joy, their laughter, and their legacy. This month, it's important to remember that we deserve a future where this isn't normal. Remember that you're not broken and you're not alone. Our stories matter, and when we speak up together, people listen. Change starts with just showing up.
Aren't you guys tired of covering this? Aren't you guys tired of being here and having to cover all of these mass shootings? I'm from Highland Park, Illinois. My son and I survived a mass shooting over the summer. I am in Tennessee on a family vacation with my son, visiting my sister-in-law. I have been lobbying in DC since we survived a mass shooting in July. I have met with over 130 lawmakers. How is this still happening? How are our children still dying, and why are we failing them? Gun violence is the #1 killer of children and teens. It has overtaken cars. Assault weapons are contributing to the border crisis and fentanyl. We are arming cartels with our guns and our loose gun laws, and these shootings and these mass shootings will continue to happen until our lawmakers step up and pass gun safety legislation. We have to do something. We all have to call our lawmakers, and we all have to make our lawmakers make change now, or this is going to keep happening, and it's going to be your kid and your kid and your kid and your kid next, because it's just a matter of time.
Welcome to the 5 most horrific school shootings that have deeply scarred American history. First, Columbine High School in Colorado, 1999. 2 students killed 13 people and injured over 20, a tragedy that forever changed school safety. Next, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, 2018. A former student killed 17 people and injured 17 others, sparking the March for Our Lives movement. If you think this one was horrific, wait until you hear the last one. Third, Uvalde's Robb Elementary School in Texas, 2022. A gunman killed 19 young students and 2 teachers, intensifying concerns about response times and security. In Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, 2012, 26 people, 20 of them first graders, were killed, bringing an overwhelming focus on gun control and mental health. The deadliest was Virginia Tech in 2007, where a lone gunman took the lives of 32 students and faculty, a tragedy still marking U.S. history. These horrific events highlight the urgent need for action to prevent such tragedies from happening again.
This is day one of me posting a video every day that there's been a mass shooting until America does something about it. I am using the Gun Violence Archive if anybody was wondering where I was getting my information from. And as you see here, January 1st, 2026, our first mass shooting of the year. First day of the year, that doesn't change anything about it. We had a mass shooting in Houston, Texas. There was multiple people shot during a New Year's Eve party at a short-term rental in Houston. The shooting happened shortly before 12:30 a.m., so they just happened to make it to this year. 5 people were injured, but only 4 of them were reported to the hospital, which is kind of confusing. As of right now, they don't have a lot of information on why it happened or what went down, but they're asking everybody who was there for information and anybody who might know something for information. This doesn't seem like a gang-related shooting. I actually don't know. There isn't a lot of information on it. At least they haven't come out with a lot of information on what went down. Just more senseless violence, and since nobody has come out with information, I think it was just an argument that just went wrong and nobody knows what's going on. But still though, there were over 100 people at that party and it could have went a lot worse than it actually did. But let me know what you guys think. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.
These are some of the USA's most shocking mass shooting statistics that everyone should know. Starting with this chart, the x-axis shows the number of privately owned guns by country, and then the y-axis shows the number of mass shootings. And if you're looking for the USA, you actually have to zoom out. Then looking at how the USA compares with school shootings specifically, the top 5 are Pakistan, India, South Africa, Mexico, and then jumping up to an alarming 288 is the USA. And this data is from 2018. Now, out of the 128 mass shootings in the US between 1982 and 2022, 123 were males, only 3 were female, and 2 were male and female. This was the chart for ethnicity, feel free to pause, but most interestingly was the chart for age. Now, as you can see, the vast majority of school shooters were ages of just 13 to 19 years old. In 2020, children in the US were more likely to die from being shot with a firearm than they were from any other cause of death. Now, naturally, these kind of statistics beg the question, why don't the US have stricter gun regulations? Well, firstly, despite what we may see and hear outside of the US, in 2020, support for stricter gun laws by Americans themselves fell to the lowest level since 2014. And when the question is posed whether stricter gun laws would lower mass shootings, only 49% of Americans said that it would. 42% thought that it wouldn't, and 9% actually thought that it would increase mass shootings.
U.S. states by school shootings. Now, as you can see, this is actually the one negative thing that Alaska does not dominate in. But the main reason I believe Alaska has few school shootings is because you actually have to attend school to shoot up a school. Compared to other U.S. states, Alaska ranks near the bottom in math and reading. But also, states with higher populations tend to experience more school shootings. However, relative to the size of their population, Kentucky has 7.7 victims per 1 million residents. Maryland has 7.1 and Alabama has 6.7. They've seen the highest rates by far over a 6-year period, their numbers being double the national average at 3.2.
This Uvalde officer had his gun taken away by his superiors after he tried to save his wife. Footage of the Uvalde shooting showed officers checking their phones during the chaos. One of these officers was Ruben Ruiz, and it turns out that his wife was a teacher in one of the classrooms that the gunman entered.
My wife's classroom.
The surviving teacher from the classroom says that he believes she could have been saved.
If the law enforcement officers on scene would have allowed him to continue pursuing the gunman.
Yeah, she would have probably lived. And I think she's one of the ones that they had said that also bled to death.
Coming in at Texas' #1 most insane murder cases is Robb Elementary School. On May 24, 2022 in Uvalde, Texas, a normal school morning at Robb Elementary turned into one of the most disturbing days in modern Texas history. Shortly before noon, an armed individual arrived on campus. Within minutes, multiple emergency calls began coming in inside the school. Law enforcement responded. But what happened next is what continues to haunt people. The officers gathered in the hallways outside 2 connected classrooms. Inside those rooms, children and teachers were trapped. For over an hour, parents waited outside the school, begging officers to go inside. Some parents were restrained, others were threatened with arrest. Meanwhile, calls from inside the classrooms continued. At one point, authorities publicly stated the situation was contained. Later, they said it was a barricaded subject. But audio, timelines, and body cam later revealed that the children were still alive and calling for help during that time. Eventually, a specialized unit entered the classroom. 19 children and 2 teachers did not survive. In the days that followed, officials gave conflicting statements. Timelines changed, responsibilities shifted, and the public narrative unraveled. An independent investigator later concluded that the response was chaotic, the leadership was unclear, training protocols were not followed. Lives may have been saved if they were trained properly. No officers on the scene that day were immediately charged. Police chief later lost his position. For the families, answers came slowly, if at all. It was a complete systematic failure. Silence and the unbearable weight of waiting while help stood just outside the door. And the question that still echoes is this: how does something like this happen and no one step in sooner? It's about accountability.
These are the worst school shootings of all time, part 1. Up first is the Virginia Tech Massacre. This young man right here, whose name is Seung Hyu Cho, killed 32 people and injured 17 more in 2 separate attacks. He is responsible for committing the deadliest attack on a school in the United States. Up next is Sandy Hook Elementary. 20-year-old boy named Adam Lanza is responsible for arguably the most senseless and brutal attack on a school in the United States. On December 14th, 2012, Lanza killed his mother before heading down to Sandy Hook Elementary, where he killed 26 people and injured 2 officers. And the most disturbing part is that the majority of his victims were children aging from 5 to 10 years old.
When are people going to wake up to understand that mass shootings in America are a huge problem? Students, children. There's been a mass shooting at Brown University. There is another mass shooting at a school on a Saturday in America. We're not mad enough. Currently, they're saying that 2 people are dead and 8 people are injured. And I am just, oh my gosh, tired of hearing stuff like this happen in America. Another mass shooting at a school. Another mass shooting at a school. And we don't think that mass shootings are a problem. We don't think that there is an issue here that needs to be fixed. We are not mad enough. They're currently under a shelter in place. But my God, when are people gonna wake up? We can't keep saying, oh, protect gun rights, students, schools. Mass shootings are a problem. You have to say that at some point.
During my freshman year of high school, I was in a school shooting at McKinney North High School. June 1st, 2018, 7 years ago, a 10th grade student walked into an empty classroom with a gun and committed suicide in the classroom. This classroom just so happened to be my English teacher's classroom that I had just came out of maybe 5 minutes before all of that happened. Apparently nobody witnessed the gunshot, but my English teacher and another student were the ones that walked in on the scene and witnessed what happened. And after we returned to school the following year, the main safety precaution that they had in place was forcing us to wear student IDs around our neck or somewhere visible on our pants so that they could see that we're a student at the school, as if that's going to stop somebody from walking into the school with a gun just because they have a student ID. The shooter was a student. Like that, how did that make sense? And this shooting happened right after Governor Greg Abbott of Texas praised McKinney ISD for having such good safety precautions, for having such great safety measures in place. Also the same year that McKinney ISD spent $70 million on a football stadium for high school football. Imagine if that much money went in to gun regulation, to protecting children as they enter your schools. Imagine that. This is not something I talk about often because I don't like reliving these traumatic moments. It's actually my first time talking about it on the internet, but I feel like it should be talked about because the amount of school shootings, mass shootings that happens every year in America, it's saddening. It's saddening, and I wish somebody would do something about it. But I'm finally ready to tell my full story of what I experienced that day, and the full video is now on YouTube.
Now, some of the footage you just saw dates way back to the 1990s, but a lot of it, in fact, most of it is recent as of the last 10 years. You know, mass shootings have been a problem for a very long time in our country. Whenever I go to other places, they always say, how can anyone live in America with all the mass shootings that are happening? But specifically, my biggest concern, besides just the general blanket of mass shooting, is the term of mass school shootings, because this would involve many young kids, anywhere from kindergarten to 12th grade, and even university students, young men and women who are transitioning out of grade school and high school into university life. And then they have to be confronted with violent, dangerous thugs coming onto their campuses and shooting them. Now, I want you to also notice that, and you can even rewind back this video. I want you to realize and just overall recognize how many of these school shooters look. They seem to all have the same sort of look to them, quite nerdy looking, not very attractive, may have been bullied in school for their looks or maybe just overall how they dressed. And that is a big concern because I can tell you personally that bullying is a common thing that happens in school. Heck, even I was bullied. But see, back in the day where I grew up in New York, if you were the victim of a bully, you handle your business. You took care of things, you took care of your business. And oftentimes after you did so, that bully would respect you because you stood up on your own too and showed that you were not going to be a punk like that. But many of these guys, in these videos, they look like they couldn't even harm a firefly. And that's the reason why I think a lot of them have had many years in which they were mistreated by fellow students, maybe even by teachers and faculty. And they say, well, you know what? I'm going to take out my vengeance on the student body. A lot of them also may have been raised in very difficult households, had difficult childhoods and so on. Some people even blame video games, violent video games like Call of Duty, for example, for the reason why these guys will go out and just, shoot up a whole student body as well as teachers and so on. I think it's ridiculous that these ingrates are in our school system and they should definitely be removed. Now, looking at some of the data from 2026 so far, when I looked at the data, it looks like we've already had 2 mass shootings on the same day in the same state of Texas for January 1st. There's more data to come out soon, but I'm going to be following this all throughout the year. I might even have a series on mass shootings, not just mass school shootings, but mass shootings in general, because it is a real problem in America. Now, other countries, they also have mass shootings, but not to the extent that the United States has. You may hear of a mass shooting in Europe or in a European country maybe once every couple of years. And even though that's still one too many, it doesn't happen on a regular basis like that. And it's really, really embarrassing as a nation to say that we have this ongoing issue within elementary schools, high schools, and colleges in which students just waltz in like it's a regular day with assault rifles. I want to highlight that, with AKs and other types of Moxbergs and stuff like that, and they just start blowing away the students and the teachers. When people often say, and this one hits home for me, being a black man in America, when people often say, why do black people commit so much crime? This is a very interesting question, because while there is a lot of crime in black neighborhoods because of the lack of resources and, gang violence and a whole bunch of nonsense, it's a lot of these shooters are not even black. So we can't just say black people are doing the crime. We can't just say that. We got to say that this is an American problem. This is not just a black problem. This is not just a white problem. This is not just an Asian problem. As you saw, that the deadliest school shooting was actually done by an Asian. We can't say that it's a problem of a specific group. It is an American problem. Now, I will say this. Mass shootings don't really tend to happen as much in black neighborhoods, and I'll tell you why. First and foremost, black people have way less resources to begin with. So while they may be able to get their hands on weapons, usually any kind of beefs that you have in the street or any kind of issues you'll have will be dealt with directly between gang members. It's not necessarily done in schools. Now, have there been shootings in schools? Absolutely. but they're usually not categorized as mass shootings. What is a mass shooting? According to sources online, anyone or any type of shooting in which there are more than 4 victims involved. More than 4 victims were either injured or killed in the shooting. And at the end of the day, that just doesn't happen to that level in Black neighborhoods. There's nothing to tout and hoot and holler about because we still have crime. And crime is an issue nonetheless. So I think it's overall an American issue and it needs to be resolved. Here's the truth, though. Here's the truth I want you folks to listen to. The fact of the matter is, if you're wondering why it's not being addressed, it will never be. We've had Democratic presidents who say, my thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and the families of the victims involved in a mass shooting or in a mass school shooting. You hear this often, don't you? I'll be praying for them. You hear the president, the presiding president at that time often say. You have a Republican president, the same exact thing. The difference between the left and right on this issue is that oftentimes the left will then right after that say, that's why we need gun control. We need to have gun control. The right, on the other hand, will say, gun control won't change a thing. We just need to be more responsible. We need to have better parenting at home. We're not going to change the gun laws because we need to protect ourselves as Americans. So overall, it's not going to make a real big difference whether you change the gun laws or not. For example, and I know I don't have any data in front of me to support this, but I know this from just living life. I spoke to many Swiss people on my travels to Switzerland. And I also looked this information up just to validate it. And in Switzerland, gun ownership rates are almost as high as in the United States, meaning that based on per capita and based on percentage of population, there are almost as many gun owners by percentage, not by number, but by percentage, in Switzerland as there is in the United States. So one would think, well, if there's more gun ownership, there would be more shootings, right? Nada, not at all. In Switzerland, on average, there's about 2 shootings per year. Like on average, there are some years where you might have like 3 or 4 or so on, but majority of the shootings that occur are not school shootings and they're not mass shootings. They're usually shootings between husband and wife, like domestic disputes, or maybe an occasional club shooting. But it doesn't really happen on a regular basis. That's not ingrained in the Swiss society, you know? And considering that they have such high gun ownership and you rarely have shootings, that just proves my point. And I'll give you another example. The United Kingdom has very low gun ownership. In fact, guns are outlawed in the UK. Did you know that? Did you know that guns are illegal in the UK? But guess what? Gang members and cartels, not cartels, let's not use the word cartels, let's say gang members and organized crime units still get their hands on guns. And there are still shootings in the UK. Now, obviously, the UK leads, specifically London, they lead the world in stabbing. So they're one of the top countries in the world in which there are the most stabbings. But there are also shootings. How is that the case in a country where gun ownership is illegal, is banned? How is it? I'll tell you why. It's because of how these weapons are moved within the country, how they're imported into the country illegally, and who gets their hands on them. You see, the gun itself is not the problem. It's the people that pick them up. They're the problems. We're talking about the student who's bullied in school, told that they're ugly, can't get girls or guys. You know, we heard in a report there were 3 girls who did mass shootings, and that may not seem like much, but I'll give you one story as a side note here, as a cliff note. There was actually a shooting. I forgot the name of the girl and when it happened. I think it was like in the 1980s or late 70s, in which a girl did a mass shooting. She went across the street from her home, and I think there was a kindergarten there, and she did a mass shooting. I want to say that this was in California. So guys, look this up online or use GPT to look this up. But she went across the street from her home and did a mass shooting. She shot up multiple kindergarten students. And right after that, when the police arrested her, they took her to Burger King. And I think she was called the Burger Queen or something like that. So look this up guys. Make sure this is what I remember from what I've read. But Girls do it too. And in fact, a few years ago, a woman did a mass shooting at the YouTube office. Look that up as well. So don't just think it's just guys, and don't just think it's white guys. It's an American problem. Okay. And I think that there will be, I really think, just in my heart of hearts, I really think no one will ever try to solve this problem. I see this as being an ongoing issue. And again, because it's been happening so many times every single year, over and over and over again, it's become so normalized to hear that. Whenever I speak to my family, especially when I'm overseas and I speak to them on the phone, and they tell me, hey, there was a mass shooting today. I'm like, really? Like, what happened? Yeah, about 70 people were shot, typical day. It's so ingrained. It's just like, c'est la vie. What can you do about it? Whereas if the same thing happened, like, for example, I remember in Germany back in 2009, there was a mass shooting in a place called Veneden. Veneden is near the city of Stuttgart in Germany. And there was a guy, and I was actually in Germany at the time where it happened. There was a guy young guy, probably about, I think, 16, 17. He was actually a rich kid, and he took his father's weapons and he went to his local high school and did a mass shooting, basically shot multiple students, shot and killed people and teachers, right? That was a big deal in Germany. In fact, the comments I've heard from Germans themselves when this happened is, are we becoming like America? This is back in 2009, guys. That was the question, like, are we becoming like America? They're comparing themselves to us because it's part of our normal ingrained culture that we have mass shootings, mass school shootings, mass bar shootings, mass restaurant shootings, mass mall shootings, all kinds of shootings and all kinds of flavors. So with that being said, do you ever think we'll be able to get past this? I think the only way to do it, and again, I'm kind of like pro gun ownership because you need to protect yourselves, especially in a society that has so much crime. But I'm also anti gun ownership. I think what we need to do is to have more security in schools. Like, for example, when I went to school in New York City, we had security guards and we had metal detectors. We never, ever had a mass shooting, not a single one. If anything, we had shootings outside the school because two students had a beef with each other and some idiot picked up a gun and shot the other kid. If anything, that happens. But we never actually had a mass shooting in the school. Never happened. One kid, I remember one day, tried to come in with a knife. Beep, 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 beep. Caught right at the door. They threw his ass out. This is what happens, right? When you have proper security, you have proper protection for the student body and also for the faculty. Why don't we have that? If we know that we have a culture of gun violence, why don't we take the adequate measures to ensure the safety of the student body and of the teachers as well? I have no clue why we're not doing it, but I'll tell you this. If you have young children, or even if you have college-age children, now is the time to either look at remote learning or distance learning, as they call it, homeschooling, or to go to a society in which these problems never occur. That is very hard to do, especially within the walls of the United States, because as you saw, in some states, they have very low shootings that average about 3 to 4 a person out of 100,000 people. That's like usually the average rate of the United States, but that's still 3 to 4 shootings, rather, every single year within those states. So it's almost like you're playing the lottery, but you're playing the lottery in which you have bigger chances of winning, or in this case, losing. Your chances of being involved in a mass shooting is pretty big. And also, you heard that other girl who said her high school was involved in a mass shooting, and she was a victim. She actually got hit and injured, recovered from that, and then years later, she's in college in a completely different place, and another mass shooting happens. So that just already tells you something's not right. Something is not hitting home right. And something needs to be done to change the system. Something needs to be done to ensure the safety of others. And I think it also starts with, how are we raising our kids at home? What entertainment are they being exposed to? How are they being treated in school? How are they being treated at home? How are their teachers treating them? This is what we need to focus on going forward. Otherwise, we're going to continue this bloody culture of killing our kids in cold blood and them not feeling safe and secure in their classrooms. And it's just baffling to me what we're doing. Whew. That's a whole lot of stuff happening, guys. Please watch yourself, watch your children, watch your entire families. I hate to say this, but please like this video if you're with me on this. Subscribe to this channel, and YouTube believes that you'll like this video right here. Check it out, and I'll see you on the next one.